Hello, my name is Casey Quisenberry, and today I'm going to show you the 3 easiest movement mechanics you can make in Unreal Engine 5. I'm going to show you how to make a sprint, I'm going to show you how to make a double jump, and I'm going to show you how to make a dash. Alright, now let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the easiest movement mechanic in Unreal 5, and honestly one of the easiest mechanics overall, a double jump. So, we are going to click on our character component right here. We are then going to just go ahead and go to the search bar. We're going to type in jump, and we're going to go down to jump max count all the way under character. And we're simply going to make this one a 2. And there we have a double jump. That's all you have to do. Simple as that. Now, I don't know why it's not in the character movement component. It doesn't really make much sense to me, but they put it in the actual just character component itself. And so if we go over here, we press play, we jump, we can then jump again. So as you can see, we have a double jump. You can even set this number to, anything you want. Let's do something crazy like 100. And the character can now just basically fly. And there you have a very, very simple double or triple or whatever jump you want. Now, however, for your game, you might not want to use the default Unreal double jump. You might think that it doesn't fit your style or doesn't fit how you want it to platform or how you want it to play. Or the physics just feel weird, or you want to make it to where the customized physics are different, or you want to make it to where the double jump launches you higher. So you might be wondering, what if I want to do that, but I don't want to just deal with a bunch of settings and I want it to be easier? Well, you can actually just make the double jump system using nodes within the character blueprint. So I'm going to show you how to make that. So the first thing, I'm just going to turn this back to 1, just so we don't have that code interfering with itself. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to disconnect this, just so like this code isn't interfering with it. If you want to, you could just use this node, or you could use your own enhanced input action, or you could just use your own action mapping. However, I'm just going to go ahead and do the spacebar key event, just because it's a little simpler for me, but do whatever you want, of course. Whatever control you want it to be, just set it to be like that. Now, there are, of course, these 2 nodes, jump and stop jumping, that handle the default jump in Unreal, but I'm going to do a different method just to show that off, and just because I think it's a little better when you're doing a self-made double jump method. So I'm just going to go off pressed, and I'm going to get a node called launch character, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's probably the most direct node. Is just literally going to launch your character, and it's going to use this velocity. For this, I'm just going to put in 600, which means it's going to be jump around 600. So here, let's just show it off to show that it works. So here we go. We can jump. We run, we jump, and it works just like a normal jump. However, of course, we can just spam it and infinitely jump into the air because there's nothing stopping us from doing that. So that's going to be the next part. that's going to be the next part of the goal. Is to fix that issue and actually get it to where it's working properly. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just going to break this link. I was just mainly showing you this just so you can see what the launch character node does. So we're just going to move that over here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a branch. And we're just going to make a boolean that's going to be called isJumping. And then we're just going to drag this out. From there, we're going to get a not bool. And we're just going to plug that in here. So basically what this is saying is that if the character is not jumping, then we're going to run the code. So after this, what we're going to do is we're going to put a do once in there. This is going to make to where you only jump once, of course. We're just going to plug that in right there. The next thing we're doing is we're going to get isJumping. We're going to set it to true because now we are in fact jumping. So what this boolean is basically doing is it's going to make sure that we can't jump while we're jumping. So they already have, in this node right here, they already have that check just within the internal function, but we're just making we're basically just making this function in actual blueprints, which is why it's going to be a little bit more expanded than this simple node. However, this is going to give us a lot more customization. I'll show you how that works in a second. So we're going to plug that in there. Let's go ahead and make that 800. Now you might be thinking, how are we going to reset this? How are we going to know if the character has landed on something? Because they could be jumping on something, which means it'll be a different amount of time than if they're just to jump straight up, or maybe they jump in a certain way. Well, the way to do that is we have a special event called event on landed. And what this event is just like it sounds, is basically when the character lands, it's going to run this code. So we're going to add a branch here. And we're just going to say we're only going to run this code if the character is jumping. So if the character is jumping, it is going to be able to run this code, again, only after the character has landed. We are going to unset this. And then we're just going to add a little bit of a delay, just in case, to make sure everything's going okay. And from there, we're just going to reset this. Let's clean that up a little bit. And so now what we have here is basically just a functioning jump. Now we're not getting that thing where we're jumping a million times in the air. We're just jumping normally. Now, the next step, of course, is to make that to where this is actually a double jump. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an integer. This is going to be called jump count, which if you remember the setting that was in Unreal was called max jump count. We're basically just going to make our own version of that variable, and we're going to call it jump count. And we're going to make that an integer. You can't make it a float because you can't have like 0.2 of a jump. All right, so the next step is to get this jump count, pull it out here. We're going to get that. We're going to go off that, and we're just going to hit plus twice, and we're going to get an incremental int. This is basically just going to add 1 to this value every single time. We're just going to get this value, and then we're going to set it here. And so every single time that we jump, we're just going to add 1 to this number. And then we're going to go over here to this branch. We're going to go all false. Let me create a little bit more space here. So all false, we're going to make another branch. And then we're going to get this jump count. We're going to pull off that and get a less than node. And then we're just going to plug this into our branch. And this number is basically how many jumps you want the player to have. So we can go ahead. Let's just go ahead and throw this to a variable. We're just going to call this max jump count. So the same as our Unreal setting name. And we're just going to put that there. And let's go ahead and just do a classic double jump. Let's set this to 2. And so we're just going to plug this in here. So what this is basically going to do is that we're going to, do the first set of code normally. We're going to go through it here, but we're going to add a 1 to this number. And so if you were to hit spacebar again, we're going to go here. But since you're jumping, we're going to go to false. We are then going to check if the jump count is at the max jump count. And if it's not, we're just going to jump again. But then we're going to add another number, and then we'll no longer be able to press spacebar and get another jump. However, if you were to do it in this code right now, if you landed, you wouldn't be able to jump again. So we need to add 1 node here, which is just going to be setting this jump count to 0. So that way it resets every time you land. And then just plug this in here, compile, save. Now we walk around, jump again, and then jump again. But I can only jump 2 times before falling. But say hypothetically we want our second jump to be higher than the current jump. So right now the jump is at 800. Let's say we want the double jump to boost us even higher, just as like a gameplay feature. Let's just promote this to a variable. Launch velocity should be good. You can also call it jump velocity or something like that. And so what we're basically going to do is have this to where the default is 800. But off of this true, we are just going to come here. We're going to set the launch velocity to, let's say, 1,000. To, again, plug that right there. So that way, when we do the double jump, we're going to jump even higher. However, it's important to note that you need to reset that on your event landed. So we're just going to go here, steal this node, set this back to 800. Actually, just for the purpose of showing it off, I'm going to set this to something crazy like 3,000. So I go here, I jump once, you see it's the same. I can jump again, it'll be the same. But then if I do a double jump, it'll launch me way up high. And you can do this for basically any jump setting. So maybe we want it to where when you jump for the second time, you don't have any air control, meaning you can't move the character during the double jump. What we could do is we could just get character movement component, get that there, set air control, we'll set it to 0, and then in here, and then we just connect it here to make sure you always reset, and we'll set it to the Unreal default, which is 0.35. So again, I jump and I can move around, I can move forward, but then if I double jump, I launch it forward and I can't move that much in the air. So you can make this to where the double jump feels completely distinct from the original jump. You can make it to where it has a different set of physics, different set of gravity. You do a whole bunch of different stuff and basically customize it to where your double jump does whatever you want it to do. Now going off the back of the double jump, let's make a dash. So normally you'd probably use something like spacebar or something like that, but I'm just going to do the Q key. And we're going to go ahead and just good practice. We're going to make an isDashing variable. And it's going to be basically the exact same setup that we had up here. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to grab this. And I'm going to go ahead and even grab a launch character node. Now I'm just going to drag this down here, plug it in, go ahead and plug this in. All right, so just like before, we're going to set our variable to be true here. All right, so now let's bring back this launch character node. So the best way that I found to do a dash in Unreal 5 is to actually use two launch character nodes. The first one, what we're going to do is we're basically going to make the character go up. That way that they're not just scraping on the ground. And then the second one, we're going to make it to where they go actually forward. So this is if you want it to be where they're dashing on the ground and not just dashing midair. I'll show you at the end how to make it to where they only can dash in air if you want that. But for right now, we're just going to make it to where you can dash either in air or on the ground. So we're just going to set this to a smaller number, not quite a jump. Let's do something like maybe 200. Again, the default is centimeters. We're then going to put a delay, but we're not even going to do 0.21. We're just going to do 0.1. And then we're just simply going to launch the character again. However, in order to make the character launch forward in the direction that they're facing, we are going to get some different variables than just setting it ourselves. We're going to first get the actor rotation. That way we're going to be launching them in the correct direction, the one that they're looking at. We are then going to get their forward vector, so they launch forward from that point. And from there, we're just going to basically add a multiplier to this number. So we're just going to have a multiply node right here. And instead of making it to where we do a vector times a vector, we're just going to right click this, convert pen, and we're going to convert it to a float. And we can plug it in. Okay, it looks like when I plugged it in, it freaked out. So we're going to convert it back to a float. Okay, and then we're just going to set this to a pretty high number. It's basically however far you want the character to dash. So I'm just going to do something like 1200. And that should be able to get us a dash. Press Q. As you can see, we can't dash anymore because we also need the event landed node. So if you want to incorporate both of these systems, that's totally fine. You can do that. What we're basically going to do is we're just going to drag off this and we're going to get an OR node. And this is basically just going to say if we are jumping or we're dashing, then we're going to run this code. However, if you just want it to be dashing, all you have to do is just plug this in here. If you just want it to be jumping, all you have to do is plug this in here. You can also, and then you can also just have the OR. You also probably use the same variable for both of these. However, I think it's probably better practice to use two. So that's what we're going to do. So we're just going to use the OR thing. And we're basically just going to do everything down here the exact same. So let's just keep that there. And let's keep all the jump stuff just right there just because it's organized. Again, if you're just doing the dash, you can just go directly off of this true. But I'm just going to collapse this to a macro. And we're just going to call this reset jump. That way we have a bit of a cleaner method of doing this. So let's go down here. And again, if you're just doing the dash, ignore all that. And then we are just going to get this variable, set it to false. And then we're just going to go over here. So the next thing we need to do is plug in this delay into this reset. However, a delay node can't just plug into two different things. So we have to basically pick one. So the easiest thing to do is just to move this down there. And we're just going to add a sequence node. So the first thing it's going to do is reset jump. And then the second thing it's going to do is reset the dash. 0.2 is a good for the do a delay for the jump. For the dash, we're probably going to want something bigger, maybe 1 second or something like that. Again, you can play around with that number, see what feels good for your game in particular. And then we're just going to go down here, clean up a bit, and then we have this system that works together. And if you're just doing the dash, just go off here and go into a delay node and go here. You don't have to worry about the sequence. This is just if you're incorporating both systems. It looks a little messy right now. You could probably organize it a little bit better than I'm doing. Now if we go to our third person character, we can walk, we can dash. And then we can also jump and then dash mid-jump. But if you notice, we're going down pretty quickly for the dash, so we're not getting the full advantage of it. So if you want to make it to where the dash is a little more smooth for the air, what we can do is basically change some of the settings while we're dashing. So I'm just going to move this down a bit. And so right here, we're basically just going to change some of our settings. So let's get character movement, set gravity scale. Let's set it to 0. And then we're also going to get air control. And we're going to set that to 0. And so just like the jumping, we're also going to need to reset that. So let's just disconnect this real quick. We're going to do a similar thing where basically we're going to make this a macro. So let's just copy and paste these back. Let's go up here. Let's set gravity to 1. Let's set air control to 0.35. Plug them in. And then just plug this in here. And then we're just going to plug this in here. And then let's just make these 3 a macro. It's a macro. Let's just call it reset dash. We have a much more controlled dash, which that was a little far. Because it looks like the gravity was a little low there. So let's just change this to like 7.5 just so it's not affecting us enough, but still affecting us. So we jump, Q, and then there we go. And you can even chain these. So let's say I do a double jump. I forgot the double jump was so high. Let me change that back real quick. Let's change it to where the second one is just 1,000. We can then chain this movement to where it's a double jump into a dash. And then everything gets reset when we land. So now we have all 3. And you can also do a similar thing if you want them to have a double dash, similar to in 2016's Doom. You could do basically the exact same system here with the count system that goes on here. And so remember, especially with a system that's as intertwined as this, remember to comment everything. But let's say hypothetically you want it to where you can only dash on the ground. It's very simple. At a branch here, and then we're just going to, I'm just going to steal this. We're going to make it to where we can't dash if we are jumping. So now if I'm going and I jump and I hit Q, I do not dash, but if I'm on the ground, I dash. But I cannot do an air dash. You can also add a similar branch up here for dashing, so you can make it to where you can't jump while dashing. So the next thing we're going to do is a sprint. I already covered this in the need to know nodes video, but I'm just going to go ahead and go over it again for anyone who didn't see that one. So I'm just going to use the shift key. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do 2 versions of a sprint. So for both of them, we're going to have the same basic setup though. Get character movement. Get max walk speed. So this is going to be how fast your character actually moves. And we're actually going to want to set that, not get it. So we're basically going to be controlling how fast the character is able to move. So currently I think the default in Unreal is 600 centimeters. So let's say that when we press the shift button, we're going to change that to 800. Or let's do 1000 actually. And then let's say when we release shift, we're going to set it back to the original, which was 600. So it's a hold shift to sprint sort of game. Make sure you're plugging character movement. Off release. And so now I'm walking normally. I hold shift. I start running a little bit faster. Now let's say hypothetically you don't want it to be where it's a hold and release. Maybe you want it to be a toggle. We're going to move this down. And then we're just going to add a flip-flop node. So now let's just make it to where it's a toggle sprint. So I'm just going to move this down here. I'm going to add a node called a flip-flop. I'm going to make it to where the first option, option A, is to set speed to our sprint speed. And then off of B, we're just going to make it our default speed. So let's copy this node down. Let's make it 600. And then again, just plug this in here. So the first time it's going to make us go faster, and the second time it's going to make us go slower. Just so it's a little bit more noticeable, I'm going to make it something like 5,000. So I'm walking normally. I hit shift. Start moving a lot faster. And then I hit shift again, and then we are back to this slow speed, and you don't have to hold the button. That's going to do it for this video. Just wanted to show you guys some easy movement mechanics you can easily make in Unreal. You know, I think this is a very good starting off point if you're making something like a 3D platformer or a movement shooter, or something that requires this kind of mechanic. I think that these systems are really customizable, and you can really play around a lot with, like, you know, the air control and the gravity settings, and just, you know, any of the settings in the character blueprint under character movement, especially under jumping and falling. You know, really mess around with these, really see how your jump feels like when you change them, and get, you know, the jump or the dash that you really want. And I think you can make a really good movement-based system in Unreal just using these very core and very simple mechanics that I showed you how to make today. So I hope you learned a lot about the 3 easiest movement mechanics you can. That's right, we make a cut. Fuck it. So I hope you. So I hope you learned a lot about the 3 easiest movement mechanics that you can make in That sounds sort of sarcastic. So I hope you learned a lot about the 3 easiest movement mechanics that you can make in Unreal 5. So I hope you learned a lot about the 3 easiest movement mechanics that you can make in Unreal Engine 5.